Welcome, everyone. My name is Harmony Barker. I am the Public Programs Manager at Holocaust Museum LA, the first and oldest Holocaust museum in the United States, founded by survivors. We were founded in 1961 by survivors who wanted to create a safe place to display their precious artifacts, to remember their family members and loved ones who had perished, and to educate future generations on the important lessons of the Holocaust. Today, the museum continues to provide free Holocaust education to students from across Los Angeles, the United States, and the world, fulfilling the mission of our founders to commemorate, educate, and inspire. Thank you for joining us for today's program, Surviving the Farhud, the Holocaust in Iraq. In June of 1941, a violent mob attacked the Iraqi Jewish population of Baghdad, where Jewish communities predated Islam, with some tracing their roots to the 6th century BCE. This pogrom became known as the Farhud. Meaning violent dispossession, the Farhud was motivated by pro-German sentiment and Nazi influence and resulted in the murder, looting, and rape of Baghdadi Jews during the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. Joseph Samuels, author of Beyond the Rivers of Babylon, was 10 years old when the mob assaulted his community and his home. Today, Joseph will share his family's story of survival, his subsequent escape from Iraq, and the history of Mizrahi Jews. Presented in partnership with JIMENA, this program is part of our Sephardic and Mizrahi Stories series, exploring Sephardic and Mizrahi culture, history, and experiences. We are so honored to have Joseph Samuels here to speak with us today. Before we get started, please note that there will be an opportunity at the end of the program to ask questions. You can ask a question by typing it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. It is now my pleasure to introduce Joseph Samuels.
Thank you, Harmony. Thanks the Holocaust Museum. And thank you, Sapir from JIMENA, the Jews indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa, headquarters in San Francisco, for inviting me to share this important story of our history that is not well known or rarely told. The story of the Mizrahi Jews who lived in the Middle East and North Africa for over 2 millennia. Thanks to the advanced technology that make this webinar feasible. And a big thank you to all and welcome to each and every one of you from around the world for taking the time to attend. I would like to welcome those who speak Arabic and Hebrew in their languages. Baruchim habaim لكل النخاخين بأسفها الزؤت. مرحبا لجميع التواجين معنا الذين يتكلمون اللغة العربية. From 1939 to 1945, 1/3 of the world Jewish population was annihilated. Since 1945, world population has quadrupled, but the Jewish population did not recover. In 1948, nearly 1 million Jews were living in the Middle East, North Africa, and Iran. Today, less than 4,000 remain in the Arab countries and an estimated 8,000 in Iran. What happened to them? And where are they now? It is important to remember the past, but is even more important to remember not to live in the past. Please join me on a brief journey of our history through the picture of a PowerPoint program. Due to time restraint, I will be briefly discussing certain events and glide over others. I'll slow down to describe the Farhud in Baghdad and share some personal and community stories then discuss the exodus of the Mizrahi Jews and see where are they now. I will also share stories of heroism, courage in the face of danger, and hope and optimism of turning tragedy to a fruitful and meaningful life. Now we go to the PowerPoint. My name is Joseph Samuels. In Arabic, Yusuf Sasson Shumel. I was born in Taht al-Takya in the Jewish quarters of the old city of Baghdad in December of 1930. Next month, Be'ezrat Hashem, I will be 91. My mother tongue is Arabic, and I grew up believing that Baghdad was my home and Iraq was my country. We begin our journey in the year 586 BCE, when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylonia breached the walls of Jerusalem after 2 years of seizure and captured the kingdom of Judah, burned the temple, and brought the young, the strong, the talented as slaves to Babylonia. This painting shows quite a line from the Psalm number 137, by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. Among the exiled, there were many scholars, wise men, and prophets, such as Prophet Ezekiel, Jonah, Ezra, and Nehemiah. This picture shows the shrine of Prophet Ezekiel buried in the city of Kifil, some 80 miles from Baghdad. 70 years later, after the exile, King Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylonia. He granted the Jews the right to return to Judea to build the second temple in Jerusalem. To the right, you'll see the stone where this inscription is written. It's found in the British Museum in London. Some did return to Jerusalem, but some stayed after 70 years with good life and were born there, so they find life interesting. I believe that those were my ancestors. The Israelite lived through many conquerors, including the Greeks, but finally succumbed to the Roman Empire when they conquered Jerusalem again in the year 70 AD. After the Roman burned the second temple, Jews moved east to Iran and Turkey, south to the Arabian Peninsula, and west to North Africa, and from there to Spain and Europe. The Babylonian diaspora became the world center of religion and culture, of the Jewish religion and culture. Many scholars, including Saadia Gaon, authored many books, including the Babylonian Talmud, the most authoritative interpretation of the Torah. Major religious academics prospered in the cities of Sura and Pumbedita. Jewish religion, as we know it today, was shaped in Babylonia. 1,000 years later, in the 7th century CE, Muslim conquered Babylonia. After the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632, thousands of zealous warriors came out of the Arabian Peninsula to spread Islam. Their weapons, they carried daggers and swords and knives, and they were on horses, camel, or on foot. And within 1 century, they conquered North Africa, crossed to Spain, conquered the Middle East, went to Iran and Turkey, and went eastward to India, Afghanistan, Indonesia, and all the way to China. Fast forward to the Middle Ages. The Ottoman Empire controlled the Middle East and North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, and went all the way to the Eastern Europe, up to the gate of Vienna in Austria. They ruled for 4.5 centuries, and were only dismantled by the end of World War I. The British and the French, who won the war, drew new borders and created the new countries: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Transjordan. They rewarded the Arab leaders that helped them win the war against the Ottoman Empire by appointing the members of the Hashemite family, the leaders, as kings and rulers of the new countries that was created. They appointed Emir Faisal as the king of Iraq. He was a wise and caring Arab leader. He was passionate to improve the life of all Iraqis and bring prosperity to its citizens. He recognized the importance of the involving of the Jewish community that was then 40% of Baghdad in building new Iraq. In the photo, we see King Faisal with the Jewish community, the Jewish religious community and leaders. King Faisal was appointed the first finance minister, a Jew. His name is Sir Sasson Haskel, who was the architect of the economy and founder of the financial and budgeting structure. Through a pure stroke of geniusness and foresight, Sasson demanded that Iraq oil revenue be remunerated in gold rather than pound sterling. This proved a bonanza to Iraq when the pound sterling collapsed. Sasson remained as finance minister till his death in 1932. King Faisal was very sympathetic to the Jewish cause. Here we see a picture with Chaim Weizmann, the leader of the World Jewish Organization. Faisal supported the establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine, providing that the Palestinians would have their own state as well. My father used to say that during Faisal, the Jewish community prospered, but Iraq even prospered much more. I truly believe in the saying in the Torah that those who bless the Jews will be blessed, and those who curse the Jews will be cursed. The golden era of the Jewish community began to decline with the death of King Faisal in 1933 and the ascension of his son Ghazi, a young, flamboyant, and spoiled 21 years old. He was interested in racing cars, and he was well known of his Nazi sympathizing. During his reign, Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, was translated to Arabic and was distributed freely. He died in a car accident in 1939 at the age of 27. After Ghazi's death, pro-Nazi sentiment continued to grow under the guise of Arab nationalism. Iraq became a hotbed of Nazi sentiment that culminated with a pro-Nazi coup in April 1st, 1941. Headed by a former Prime Minister Rashid Ali al-Gailani and masterminded by a Jew hater, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini. The king resigned the government and the government fled to Jordan. Here in the picture, we see the Grand Mufti with the Prime Minister Rashid Ali. And here another one, we see Grand Mufti with Hitler. The Jewish community's condition continued to deteriorate by the day, not by the hour. Anti-Jewish articles appeared in the daily newspaper, and Radio Baghdad incited anti-Jewish sentiment in the open. Jews were picked up in the street in the middle of the day, accused of signaling to the British plane with flashlight and accused of being spies. We all knew what it meant to be arrested, with the brutal torture that make them to confess whatever the government wants. I don't want to describe that torture to make anybody sick, but it was very sickening. We all walked with few dinars in our pocket, just in case if we stopped by a policeman that we can bribe them. We faced hell daily. On May 31st, 1941, the British forces arrived at the outskirts of Baghdad. Upon arriving, the pro-Nazi government collapsed. But the British army did not enter Baghdad. The al-Gailani and his conspirators were able to fled to Iran. The Jewish community in Baghdad felt a sense of relief, especially as it coincided with the festival of Shavuot, when we believe that God gave us the 10 Commandments. We had good reason to rejoice. I too was uplifted and jubilant. Early morning, Monday morning, June 1st, 1941, the full scale of tragedy of the Farhud broke out. Soldiers in civilian clothes, policemen, some on horses, and large crowd of Iraqi men brandishing swords and daggers joined the pillage, helping themselves to the loot as they plundered over 1,500 Jewish homes and stores. All through the night, we heard gunshot and sporadic screaming of women. Then sudden quiet. Unarmed and unprepared to defend themselves, Jews were vulnerable and helpless. I was shaken, desperate, and angry. Excuse me. On the first day of the Farhud, my older brother Eliyahu, adventure nearly cost his life. He rode his bike to visit rode his bike to visit his friend, but quickly came home traumatized and crying. He had seen men on Rashid Street, the main street of Baghdad, dragging out the Jewish passenger from a minibus, robbing their possession and stabbing them to death. My family locked and reinforced our door by stacking furniture against it. I carried buckets of water to the roof to be boiled with oil to toss on the marauders should they come and break in. We stayed up all night, barricaded in our home. My father was praying and reading the book of Psalm, but my brothers and I were too busy to join. Not waiting to appear weak to my older brothers, I quietly cried myself to sleep at night. Later, I heard of Muslim men standing in front of Jewish homes with guns and daggers to protect them. Some even sheltered Jewish families in their own homes. Those were the good, honorable, and faithful Muslims, the righteous among the nation. They were our true heroes. These stories restored my faith and made me realize that there were many good Muslims among us. We were saved and unhurt and unharmed. But my uncle Moshe and Meir were not that lucky. Their homes were totally ransacked, and one of my aunties broke her legs while jumping over the roof to the neighbor. Next day, June 2nd, 1941, the British and the Iraqi troops entered Baghdad. They shot through the crowd and dispersed them. The government official report of the Farhud showed 179 Jews were killed and 400 injured. An undetermined number of women raped. The community reported over 400 murdered and 1,000 injured. There was at least 100 injured that were poisoned when they went to the hospitals. Many bodies were dumped in the Tigris River. Here's a picture of the mass grave where body dumped without any religious ritual. There was no resistance, no fighting back, nowhere to run, and nowhere to hide, and no country to take us. Life went back to normal. The Iraqi pro-British government restored order. While the scars of the Farhud were engraved in our hearts and psyche, we had to look to the future with hope. Here's the photo of my family in 1944, missing only of the seven brothers, my brother Eliyahu, who left Iraq after graduating from high school in 1942 to study and never returned back. While the United Nations was debating the partition of Palestine to Arab and Jewish state, demonstration erupted in the main street of Baghdad and in many capitals of the Arab countries. As high schools were closed, Jewish students marched with the mobs. We will be framed that we are disloyal to the Arab cause. The sign in Arabic reads that the United Nations project of the partition of Palestine should fail. How I wish that King Faisal was alive in 1947. Maybe he would have been able to influence the Arab leaders and convince the Palestinians to start their own country, side by side, Israel. How Palestine and the Middle East would prosper. May his soul rest in peace and his memory be a blessing. When Iraq, with 4 Arab nations, failed in its war against Israel in May of 1948, they turned against the Jewish citizens with accusation of disloyalty and treason, summary arrest, torture, and jail that finally ended by the arrest and moving of a most famous Jewish merchant, Shafiq Adas. He was convicted by an army court-martialed, and he was publicly executed on May 23rd, while crowds were cheering. When I saw the body of his picture in the front page of the Zaman paper, the Times, I became hysterical. The Jewish community was shaking to its core. Here is the picture of being taken into the jail and the court martial and his body hanging. In December of 1949, after I was refused an exit visa to leave Iraq to go to the United States for college, I decided to smuggle out of Iraq. I traveled with my younger brother from Baghdad to Basra and was smuggled out in the middle of the night, hiding in a boat under false structure covered by hay. Here's a sketch of the boat. It has no motors. It was moving by punting and rowing. I stayed 2 months. That trip was horrible. I described it in my book when we got stuck for the night, and it's a very sad story, but finally I made it, and I arrived to Iran, and I stayed 2 months in Ahwaz in Iran to help others who successfully made it out of Iraq. Then I traveled to Tehran, and from there I flew to Israel on March 2nd, 1950. I tasted freedom for the first time, and that was the happiest day in my life. We were taken to a receiving camp in Haifa to check our healths. Then we went for a we transported to a ma'bara, refugee camps near Netanya, a city tent. We slept on steel beds, straw mattress, and we stood in line for a free meal in the ma'bara. After a couple of weeks in the refugee camp, I went to a kibbutz for a short while. Then I did different menial jobs. I took a course in stone cutting to build walls, and then went to a farm to remove stones to make the earth cultivated there. Then I joined the IDF, and I was assigned to the Navy. In 1951, the Iraqi government allowed Jews to leave Iraq with one suitcase per person after renouncing their citizenship. All their possessions, properties, and assets were confiscated. 95% of the Jews took that opportunity and left to Israel. Those who remained faced persecution that continued after each failed war against Israel. After the Six-Day War, and there was a year after, there were public hanging of 9 Jews accused of spies in Baghdad. That was the closing chapter of the existence of the Jews in Iraq was sealed. Here are the number, is a map that shows where the number of Jews lived in the Middle East and North Africa in 1948. And here's a chart that shows the systematic erasing of Jewish history by the Iraqi government, followed by the Arab leaders, with the exception of Morocco, drove the Jews out from Arab lands to leave without looking behind. After 26th century of continuous presence in Iraq, only 3 Jews remained out of 135,000. The Jews from other Arab land, realizing that there is no future for them in the Arab world, they too left without looking behind. What happened to them, and where are they now? Half of Israel's population traced their ancestry to the Mizrahi Jews. Jews from Arab land and Muslim countries. The rest found homes in Europe, Canada, United States, and other parts of the world. They are proud to be part of their new home. I am happy and proud to report that out of nearly 1 million Mizrahi Jews, refugees, none have remained as a refugee or living in a refugee camp. Like me, we all buried our past traumas, leaving our homes to start a new life, with a new country and a new language. We all looked up forward to build the future, our future, and the future of our children with hope and optimism. In 2014, Israeli government recognizing these events as direct result of the Holocaust and have created a special Remembrance Day, November 30th, as a Mizrahi Day, a commemoration day. We are all lucky and fortunate to be here today. thank God for giving me the health and the tenacity to be here to continue the legacy and make our story known to as many people as I can. Thank you again, all and one, for being with me.
Thank you, Joe, so much for sharing that presentation, for sharing your family story, and for the history lesson as well. I'm sure our audience has all learned something new today. I want to now let our audience know that you can ask questions at this point. You can type any questions that you have into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. All right, Joe, are you ready for some audience questions?
Go ahead, Harmony.
Okay, great. So we have a question here about what life was like for Jews in Iraq immediately after the Farhud. Were there people who left immediately after, and what routes were they able to take to leave Iraq at that time?
Good question. Some were able to leave, very few. Those who were well-to-do, they have some left to England, to India. The situation was quiet, but the scars were deep. But mostly couldn't. There was no way, no country to take us. Israel didn't exist yet. And I know my brother left, because he was, he finished high school and he left. But very few left. Remember that we are living there for 26th century. Our home, our culture, our language, our life was just part of the Iraqi culture. So, some thought this is a passing wind. Some thought that is, that's some bad people, but not too many people left.
Thank you. We have a question here about how you felt after the Farhud. How did you feel anger or a sense of injustice, and how did you deal with that personally?
I grew up with believing that Muslims are good. My father was a merchant, importers of textiles, and he has many Muslims clients, and you always praise them to be honorable and decent. At that time, they called the person fearing God, Khaif Allah in Arabic. They were like, decent, and always, I grew up, then I found I had Muslim friends. My brother have that. But after the Farhud, I was shaken so badly. I didn't know, I was feeling very bad. But then I learned to adjust quickly. The family, we moved to another house, and life went on as normal. There was no any incident of anti-Semitism, but so although that I felt angry, I resigned to it. The love of the family and the friends really compensated on us, and we are hoping. I said I knew that I may not be continuing my future in Baghdad. So I was studying very hard, and I said, when I finish high school, I will go to America. And when I finished, I did well in school. I was accepted in 3 universities in the United States. I dreamt to be a nuclear physicist, but the Iraqi government refused what most people don't know about exit visa, that not only visa to enter a country, but a visa to get out. You can have, I had visas, I had passport to leave, but they wouldn't give me an exit visa. So, and when I saw what's happening in 48, I gave up hope and I left, I smuggled out.
And how old were you when you left? You were probably about 18?
I was 19.
19.
I was born 1930, I left in 49.
And how old were you when you finally came to the United States?
Oh, I lived in Israel 6 years after I finished, 3 years after I finished my Navy. And I hoped again, maybe I'll go to Canada to go to college. I was accepted at McGill University to study. But when I arrived, conditions were difficult. It was cold, it was a new language, and I didn't have money to continue it. And standing in the refugee camp, waiting for a free meal, although I was grateful that somebody fed me, but I felt sense of humiliation at my age to stand up for a free meal. So I promised myself I will never be in that position. So I always wanted to be work, to be responsible, to be independent. And that's what I did. You know, when I came to Canada, I couldn't continue in the college. I went to work, I got married. Then we moved to the United States. After 22 years, we moved to the United States in 1978, and we are here 43 years. But I must say, I am living now that I never dreamt or hoped to be in the life that I'm living now. You know, surrounded by the love of my family, my 3 lovely children, my grandchildren, and enjoying the freedom in the United States. And I say, God bless America.
Thank you for that. See, we have a few questions about your life in Iraq. We have a question here about, is there anything that you miss about Iraq?
I'm sorry?
We have a question about if there's anything that you miss about
Yes.
Iraq and your childhood there.
Yes. Last year, I was interviewed by a journalist from Basra, and he asked me if things got better, you know, would you like to go back? And how do you feel about Iraq? So I said, I have a contradictory feeling, one of sadness and one of joy. I was sad of the good life that I had there. I thought this was my home. I had the family. I had the closeness of the family meant a lot to me. We had the festivals, Passover and other festivals. I grew up among, with there were nice people with me around it. We lived a good life. Our financial situation, although that I was born in a poor area, and I didn't know that we are poor, but later on we got more wealthy. We got wealthier. So we had a beautiful home. They call it villa. We had a private car and a chauffeur and maids. So I feel sad that I left all, especially the friends, whether Muslim, Christian, and Jews. But then I was happy that I left. I was happy that I tasted the freedom for the first time. I was happy that I don't need to walk with fear, to see a policeman, to be frightened. I was happy not to hear that this man was arrested and he died in torture. I was happy that I left. So it's a mixed feeling. I still carry it with me. I missed, the river. It was, with they call it Samak Mazgoof and all this thing. But I'm happy where I am, and I'm happy that I left. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, I think so. You mentioned the something you miss was family and friends and the community that you had there. Did your parents and siblings and family relocate and leave Iraq after you left?
Yes.
And where did they settle?
Yes. After I smuggled out and the Iraqi government allowed the Jews to leave Iraq, my mother and my brother left on that, what they called the Mifta Ezra ben Hamya, that transporting the Jews from Iraq to Israel. So she came in with one suitcase that maybe she got a couple of photos. The photos that I showed on the screen was the one that she brought with her. And then I left with my younger brother. Then my father and my older brother, who was the genius in the family, he was 20 years older than I am, and he never finished high school, but he had a PhD in common sense. He knew how to bribe the authorities to get license to import. He knew how to negotiate in life. And they stayed for another year, and they were able to smuggle some of the money. But when one of the customer came in and threatened them, if he didn't pay, when he was a Muslim customer, threatened them that if they ever report him that he didn't pay, you know what happened to their lives. So they decided to leave. So they left the villa, they left the car, they left everything. And both my father and my older brother Shumail smuggled to Kurdistan. From Kurdistan, they went to Iran, and they all came to Israel. So we all ended up basically in Israel, but later on I came to Canada, and my two brothers and sister also came to Canada. And they passed away, but I still have one brother in Canada. Sorry, go ahead.
So when your family moved to, all came to Israel in different stages, did you still kind of speak Arabic together? Had you known Hebrew growing up? Did you learn Hebrew when you came to Israel?
Good question. After the Farhud, we realized that we may have to leave one day. So there was an organization from Israel to teach us Hebrew. We were allowed to learn Hebrew to pray, but we were not allowed to study. We were not allowed to speak it, to learn to speak it. So we learned to speak Hebrew. It was in the underground. It was in secret. We learned to speak Hebrew. And they were trained just in case if there's another Farhud, how to defend ourselves. I learned quite a good Hebrew when I arrived to Israel. But my parents, although my fathers prayed very well, they couldn't speak. So I spoke with them in Arabic with my parents, but Hebrew became my language, especially when I joined the service, the Israeli Defense Force, and we began to speak Hebrew. And I was blessed with special talents. I can learn languages quickly. So I was really fluent in Hebrew, and I spoke Hebrew. So,
and sorry, go ahead.
I was saying that I spoke Arabic and Hebrew. And of course, I learned English and French in high school.
And today, does the Iraqi government acknowledge the Farhud? Has there been any sort of apology or recognition of what happened?
Good question. Iraq not only recognized the Farhud or apologized, but during I want to say that I don't have hate against the Iraqi people. because there are so many good ones. And I sympathize how they suffered during the last 70 years under the coup d'etat, under the Ba'ath Party and Saddam Hussein. So they really suffered. So what was the question again?
Whether the Iraqi government has acknowledged.
Yeah, so the Iraqi government not only not acknowledged that or apologized. And during the era of Saddam, they took all, as the Jews left, or the religious artifacts, and whether they stole it, they confiscated, they took it and stored it. And an important history happened in 2003 after the Allied invasion to depose Saddam. They discovered in one of the building, the secret police building headquarters that was bombed. And luckily the bomb didn't explode, but damaged the building. They found trove of Jewish artifacts stored in the basement and in the water. So to make the story short, they informed the American government, and the American government sent a special plane they took it in frozen containers, all these Jewish artifacts, and they brought it to the United States, and they restored it. They spent $3 million and they restored it. It's called the Jewish artifacts. And it showed here all in America in different museums. So the Iraqi government still have a lot of religious artifacts that's stored, and they basically they are still at war with Israel. They try to wipe up the history, the Jewish history from Iraq, and they don't want to talk about it. There are some good Iraqis that really they want to revive, to tell the stories there in Iraq, but generally the government is not interested.
That's unfortunate, and unfortunately somewhat common in situations where the government has been complicit in atrocities against its people. We have a few questions here to our audience. We're receiving a lot of questions. I think we have time for one or two more, but we do have a couple of questions here about whether you've found or are aware of any Iraqi Jewish communities here in the United States.
Yes, there are a number of Jewish communities. When I lived in Canada, there was a big Iraqi Jewish community. Some that they left to England and they came to Canada. And there are major Jewish communities in London. And one of the organizations there, it's called Harif, led by Lynn Julius, who wrote a very important book about the history of Jews called Uprooted. And she heads of, then they had a lot of Zoom and the discussion about the Iraqi Jews. They have a Jewish community there. There's a community here in Los Angeles, which I belong to, that's Kahal Joseph. And they have different places, but mostly are in Israel. They are really one of the largest communities there. It's the Sephardic community, and if you go there, you'll still find restaurants with the old Iraqi Baghdadi food that make your mouth water. So they're all spread all over. And by the way, Harmony, I'm ready to stay longer if you have any more questions than the time limited.
Okay, we'll see if we can fit in a few more questions. Do you have a favorite? You mentioned food that might make your mouth water. Is there a favorite Iraqi Jewish dish that you're thinking of?
I'm addicted to rice. Anything with rice I enjoy. Of course, one of my favorite is what they call tibit. That's the stuffed chicken with cut up giblets and different pieces inside with rice, filled with spices, and cooked overnight. Usually, my mother used to cook it overnight for Shabbat. The whole chicken. I can list a lot of the kubbas, lot of good food that I enjoy. I'm fortunate I have somebody here, an Iraqi woman that cooks, and she brings me food to the house. So I still reminisce, although that I'm Americanized, I eat American food, but I still reminisce and enjoy the Iraqi or the Middle Eastern food.
Well, I think we're talking about this just in time for lunch, so I'm sure everybody's stomachs are now growling a little bit as they listen. So we have quite a few questions from the audience, and I'll try to synthesize a few of these, asking how your experience in the Farhud has influenced your thoughts about Muslim-Jewish relations today, and as well as we have some questions asking your thoughts about the role you think that Mizrahi Jews might be able to play in Israel, in politics, in trying to influence a better path forward for things in the Middle East. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Good question. Yes, I mean, we are closest to them. We can speak their language. In fact, you mentioned my book, Beyond the Rivers of Babylon. I am now in the process of translating it to Arabic. And I have an Iraqi who lives in Iraq. He's helping translating it, because my Arabic is rusty since I didn't speak on a daily basis or updated the knowledge. And I consider him a close friend. I don't know, he may be attending the Zoom here. If he is, hi, Ali. Yes, and I think the big events that with the Abrahamic Accord that happened last year, where the Gulf states and Bahrain, also Morocco and Sudan made peace, realizing how important the relationship with Israel, that good commerce, Israel deal with the other two countries in peace with Egypt and Jordan. Despite Israel is a desert land, they sell water to Jordan. And I hope that with the Abrahamic Accord, that other Arabs can come closer to think that it's time that the Palestinians realize that they want to establish a country rather than eliminate Israel. As Golda Meir said, when the Arab begin to love their children more than they hate the Jews, there will be peace. So I hope that I'm ready to, I contact few people that I speak to, and I'm delighted that many people that are willing to hear. In fact, just a few months ago, there was some conference in northern Iraq and Kurdistan asking that the Iraqi government should think about the Abrahamic peace, the Abrahamic Accord, but they were shut down. They were refused. Luca?
Yes.
I apologize. My computer was about to run out of battery, so I've had to do a quick location change. All right. Sorry about that.
I can see you. I can see you.
It was a slight technical difficulty. All right. I think we have time for one more question. Let's see here in our questions. We have quite a few questions about whether you have any information you might be able to share about how to connect with other Iraqi Jews, or whether you've done know of any resources to research ancestry and genealogy for people who might be interested in researching their own heritage.
I did not do any genealogy of my ancestry, but there are a good organization that people can connect. JIMENA is one of them. JIMENA is very active, and it's in San Francisco. JIMENA, Jews indigenous to the Middle East and North Africa. You have Harif in London. I guess these are the most connected if somebody wants to connect with them. I have my name here, my email, and my website, joesamuels.net, to share my story and my, you can find my book on Amazon to tell the stories. And that's the only connection I have to offer to people who wants to connect with others.
Great, thank you. For those of you who are interested, I've shared JIMENA's website in the chat. I'm also sharing a link to purchase Joe's book if you are interested in reading Beyond the Rivers of Babylon. We will also, everyone who registered for this program will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording of this program, as well as I can share some of these links and resources in that email as well. So
and if I add,
receive that.
If anybody had a question that has not been raised, here's my email. You can write me and you could find some answers maybe in my book.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you everyone.
Yes, thank you so much to Joseph Samuels and to JIMENA for their partnership, and to Joe for speaking with us here today. We can also say a little thank you to Luca off screen for helping run the PowerPoint. On behalf of Holocaust Museum LA, I want to thank you, Joe, for sharing your story and your time with us. Thank you again to JIMENA for being a valued partner. Before we sign off, I want to invite everyone to join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. for our weekly Holocaust Survivor Talk. You can also join us the week after Thanksgiving on Monday, November 30th at 4 p.m. for our Inside the Acid-Free Box series. Museum staff will present a behind-the-scenes look at a rare collection of artifacts that survived the concentration camps. You can find more information about our virtual events on our website at holocaustmuseumla.org. Additionally, a recording of this program will be available on Holocaust Museum LA's YouTube channel tomorrow. Everyone who registered for this program will also receive a link to that recording. Holocaust Museum LA brings you programs like today's at no charge. If you are enjoying our programs, please consider supporting our work by becoming a member. To learn more about our membership levels and benefits, visit holocaustmuseumla.org/membership. Thank you again to Joseph Samuels, JIMENA, and to all of you for joining us here today. Take care, and we hope to see you again soon.
Special thanks for you, Harmony, to host this program.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure, Joe.